Hello everyone, Blake Thompson here with Corsica Horse Sale, and I am sitting here today with legendary horse breeder and trainer, Mr. Jim Babcock of the Babcock Ranch. Thank you for joining us here today, Mr. Jim.
Well, Blake, thank you. That's a lot of kindness, and it's appreciated. This is a great opportunity to come here to Ty and Melanie's Solo Select Ranch. This is pretty nice.
Yeah, most definitely. We should definitely do that before we get started. We are coming to you live today from Solo Select right here in Gainesville, Texas. Solo Select Drive, and Ty and Melanie Smith have been the kindest and been huge supporters of Corsica Horse Sale ever since day one, ever since we started, and we can't thank them enough. And the reason we're here today, we have the opportunity, and we are so thankful for the opportunity at Corsica Horse Sale to have the Babcock Ranch Dispersal sale. We're going to sell 43 head of Babcock raised horses right here in Corsica, South Dakota on September 11th and 12th. Mr. Jim, I just brought you here today to tell us a little bit about your history and tell us about Babcock Ranch.
It's an awesome opportunity to be associated with you, Blake. Your voice has been something that's stuck in my head since the first time I've heard you. So it's really neat to get an association with you guys as well as Ty and Melanie. So I'm excited to be here as well, and would like to tell the story of Babcock Ranch. And I'd like to start it from the beginning so that we can explain to people that everyone's got the same opportunity.
Yes, sir. So when did you start showing and raising horses?
When I was 14 years old in Canada, my parents gave me an opportunity to make a choice between a set of golf clubs or a horse. And I had craved horses. And my mom and dad took me all over a small town in Ontario called Dresden. And I knew where every pony was in every backyard. And they would just take me for a drive around town and let me go pet the babies and the horses.
So you didn't come from a horse family?
No, my father absolutely hated horses, or did not appreciate them was probably a better way. His father was a farmer, and he had worked the teams of horses. And on Saturday nights, he'd have two teams of horses. He'd take one team to town after he got them fat and slick and shiny and brushed, and he would trade those off and get a lesser team, but a little money. And so after a period of time, he'd take the other team into town and go through the process. So he did that his whole life. And my dad, all he saw was the manure that came out the back end of the horse, and he didn't really think it was that exciting.
And Dad didn't see the fun in it?
No, he didn't. So when I came along and wanted horse, I had the greatest parents in the world. And they supported me 1,000%. And they went out and for that 14th birthday, they gave me a choice between golf clubs or a horse. I naturally selected the horse.
Yes, sir.
We went and looked at it, and it wound up being a pony that he could buy for $70. And I guess my chin probably hit my chest or the floor because I had really gotten my hopes up to go get a horse. And so I kind of stood there and accepted it. That's what it was. I'd have to go to the golf clubs. And Dad said, if you'll give me a couple of weeks, we'll go get you a horse. And so we went to a horse trader about an hour away from home that naturally didn't tell you any truth on anything. My mother said, we want a nice quiet horse for a young boy to learn how to ride on. And so he said, oh, I've got the horse for you, because he said, what's your budget? And the budget was pretty small. So he had taken a horse the week before called Sammy J, at least that's what we called him. And he run him into the sidewall of a cement block barn and knocked himself out, and he hurt the rider. And that horse was for sale for $250 for a kid's horse. So that's where I got started. And Mom and Dad bought that horse and a saddle for $125. That was Texas saddle, and because it had Texas stamped on it, and a pair of boots for $60. So they went to the credit union, and they had to borrow the money for the horse and the saddle and the pair of boots. And that's how I got started in the horse business.
Unbelievable. Started right there with that $250 horse and a $125 saddle and a $70, $60 pair of boots.
Yep, that's how we got started.
Wow.
And it was amazing because I had a younger sister that was about 8 years younger, and part of my opportunity to get this horse was that I had to babysit my sister. So there was a racetrack in town. We could rent a stall for $15 a month, and it was a standard bred track, and they really didn't like anybody with a riding horse there, but my sister and I would kind of hide out in one of the barns all day long, so we stayed out of everybody's way so we could ride this horse when we had the opportunity. And that we'd spent the summer that way. I'd ride her in the carrier of my bike about 2.5, 3 miles from my house to out there to feed it and take care of the horse. And we both got started in the horse business at that time that way.
She became a horse lover too.
Yep, she did, and she was very successful as well.
So tell me how you began showing horses and coming originally from Canada, ended up here in the United States.
Well, after that horse run away with me 2 or 3 times, Dad decided we probably need a little better horse. And so we went and bought my first broodmare, and because I thought if we got a broodmare, we could breed it and then we'd have 2 horses. Well, we bought a mare called Sister Sorrel. It wasn't a very pretty mare, but she rode a little bit, and I thought, well, we'll have a broodmare. After 2 years of trying to get her bred, we found out she didn't have any ovaries. So she was very difficult to breed. So we went from there, and we said, okay, we're going to step up and we're going to go get a little better horse. And we bought a mare called Skippy Lass, which was a little brown mare, pretty plain. Had her ears pinned back against her head all the time. That's just how she lived. We went to one horse show, and I walked around like I was in a parade for old people because I didn't know what was going on. I just would look over my shoulder and try to imitate what other people were doing in the class.
Yes, sir.
And so my mother was standing along the fence, and an Irish horse trainer was standing there that showed reining horses and cow horses at that time. And he said, "Who's that big dumb kid out there?" And that happened to be me. And my mother didn't say a word, but she just listened. He said, "He doesn't have any idea at all where he's at." So when the class was over with and I came out of the class, my mother said, "We're going to tie up your horse to the trailer." And she knew nothing about horses. And then we went over to this other person and said, "Would you be able to help my son learn how to be a better horse person?" And he said, "No, I don't take kids." And she said, "Well, how does a big dumb kid that doesn't know anything learn anything in this business?" And she kind of embarrassed him into saying, "Well, we'll maybe take a shot at it, but I'm going to have to charge you money for the week to be there." And he said that cost is going to be $35 a week, thinking he would scare us away. And at that time, that was consideration money. That was a lot of money to pay.
Yes, sir.
So they did. They paid $35 for me to go learn how to ride with him. And the following week, I came back to Leamington Fair with this little mare, and I won the showmanship at halter, and I won the Western Pleasure, and I won the reining, and I was second in the barrel race, and I won my first all-around bronze trophy.
1 week later.
1 week later. And I went home, and I was homesick because I'd never been away from home before, and this guy really worked me hard. I mean, really worked me hard. And so I went back home, and they got a call the next morning as he called me and said that he had fallen down in the raining pattern because it was on green grass and had a light dew on it, so it was slippery, and broke a leg. So he said, "I won't be able to ride for 2 months. You're off school right now for summertime. Will you come back and go to work for me?" And he said, "It won't pay anything, but if you'll come back, I'll feed you, and we'll get you to a few horse shows." And so that was the deal I made for the summer the first time, was to go ride with that Irish cowboy.
You went and stayed that summer for free.
For free.
Just for the opportunity.
Yep.
To learn how to be a horseman.
Yes, sir.
That's wanting to be a horseman. That's how the great ones. That's where all the great ones start.
Yeah, it was a tough beginning, and you either got to be real dumb, or
Definitely dedicated.
got a '49 Ford truck, cost $250, and he brought home 2 gallons of paint from his work, gray and black, and I painted that truck with a roller and a paintbrush. And then I took a stencil and put Babcock on the door in about 4-inch letters, Babcock. And I went to my first horse show, and Dad's shoulders and mine would touch in that 49 Ford truck because there's no room. You could look between my feet and you could watch the road. We were going to go 40 miles down the road. Chunks of rubber started flying over top of the cab and hitting on the hood and out in front of us. I had a 1-horse trailer that had sucked in several gallons of paint because it was wood. And we wound up having to, it dropped right on the highway because there was only a single axle. Both tires went about the same time, and they were old tires. And so we drug it off the side of the road with that truck. And he said, well, that horse show is about 4 or 5 miles down the road. He said, you're going to have to ride down there because top speed for us about that time was, and that would have been 66 or 65, was about 40 mile an hour. And so we left 2 or 3 hours early.
Sure.
So I had to saddle my horse, and I had to ride it 4 or 5 miles to the first horse show that I went to. And he gave me a $20 bill. And with that 20, I entered every class they had at the horse show for the youth because it was $1 per class. So I spent the whole 20 on musical stalls and egg and spoon and pole bending and just anything. And I had no idea what those classes were, except I walked into class and watched other people show, and then I tried to imitate what they were doing. That was the first horse show to go to.
All you knew is if it was a horse event, you wanted to be part of it.
Yes, sir.
You wanted to learn.
Yep.
That's unbelievable. When did you make the move from Canada here to the United States?
Yeah, I made that move in August of 1983. The reasoning behind that, at that point, I had gotten a chance to show quite a bit in Canada and all through the northern United States and stuff, and all the way down to Florida, with a bunch of really nice quarter horses, good ones. And I wound up getting a stud called Mito Commander, a gray stallion, that wound up being a special horse. At the Quarter Horse Congress, the largest horse show in the world, I was a reserve all-around horse with him. After about 2.5 or 3 weeks of showing, he wound up being reserve champion of the whole horse show, and there was 10,000 entries at that show. So that was a pretty big deal. People loved him. I won all the major state fairs in the north, Ohio and Michigan at Halter, Ohio, Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, New Jersey, Ontario, Indiana. All those places he was grand champion stud. So that was a horse that really gave me some national recognition. I had won state awards, a lot of them prior to that point, but that horse took me to a different level. And we figured out pretty quickly that that horse was not going to would draw the horses out of Texas and Oklahoma and places like that to go to Canada, cross the bridge into a different country in the wintertime, fighting ice and snow, that probably none of those good mares would ever come up and be bred there. And that was well before artificial insemination. So what we would do is decided that we had to move the stud south if we were going to try to breed any mares to him. And that's how I moved to Sanger, Texas.
That's when you came to Sanger, Texas.
Yep.
I hear you talking about showing those horses the same horse and halter that you show in the cutting.
Yes.
They were so versatile. There were so many different disciplines that you'd show one horse in. And Mito Commander was the first horse you had that was success in multiple disciplines. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was. I wound up at the end of that year showing 2 horses, and I was showing a 9-horse tractor trailer for years, full of horses, and probably a couple of 4 horses at the same time. So I'd take a lot of horses to a horse show. But that year I wound up with having another gelding called Kemp's Poco Star. He was a buckskin gelding, a junior horse. So I qualified Mito Commander and 6 events in the senior open classes, and I qualified Kemp's Poco Star in 5 events. So the 2 horses I showed in 11 classes at every horse show, and would stay in the ring all day long just showing 2 horses.
That's unbelievable. That's amazing. Well, I can remember hearing of Mito Commander as a child. I know a lot of people nationwide have been familiar with your program for a long time, but I can remember the first time that I became familiar with it, and the most famous horse that maybe one of the top famous horses that ever lived, Smart Chickalina.
Well, he was good, and Blake, I was really impressed with how the interview's going until you told me that I impressed you as a kid. That meant that I was much older, and that's a hard pill to swallow at my age. But I have been there a long time, and I've been blessed. The Lord's blessed me with all kinds of things, and every day, and the ups and the downs. And Smart Chickalina came along. I fell in love with him the first time I seen him. I went by a cutting one night because I was a horse trader, and I wanted to look for all new horses. So there was a set of spotlights up. People were working some cutters. And so I went by, and I saw a horse that I've just flipped out over. A 10-year-old boy was riding a horse about the same age as your youngest son. And he was riding this big, pretty mare around that I thought was fancy. And at those days, I had the dreams that if I could take a horse up there and win the Western Pleasure, and then go and show in the cutting pen, that would get some attention. And that's what I was always looking for, is how do you get some attention at the bigger shows. So I said to the young fellow, I said, is your mom and dad here? And they said, yeah, they are. And he pointed out where it was. So I said, let's go over and talk to him. So we went over, and I said, I'm really pretty impressed with your mare. Is she for sale? And it was no. But not only no, it was like hell no. And so I turned around with my tail between my legs and walked back across the arena and put my foot up on the fence, kind of disgusted, because I found a horse that I knew I could go beat him with, but I couldn't, like always, I couldn't afford to buy her because they wouldn't even give me a price.
Right.
So I sat there for a while and I watched him work her, and I didn't understand how they were working cutting horses down there, because he wasn't in there trying to show, he was in there trying to tune it up. And so but it looked like he was mad at her. So when I went over, I said, well, if he didn't have a very good ride, maybe he'll price her. So I thought, I'm going to offer him $30,000. That he doesn't know how much money I was going to offer him, especially in my position, because I probably had $3,000 in the bank account, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And you've never been there, have you?
Yes, sir. Most all of my life.
So I walked back over, and I want to buy her. And he says, I said, can you tell me a little more about this mare? Well, he's just showed, and he was just taken off his shops, or he worked his horse, taken off his shops. And he said, well, she was reserve champion at the Derby, and she's a daughter of Doc Alina, and she's out of a Gaybar King daughter. We turned down $125,000 for her. So I said, yes, sir, thank you very much. And I went
That
back.
$30,000 was out the window.
So I went back across the arena, and I just stared at her for a while. So I went home, and I was pretty unhappy, and I had a veterinarian friend that I told him that I had found a horse, but like always, I couldn't afford. I can find the good ones, I just can't afford to buy them. So I went to the cutting fraternity, and I saw a horse in the cutting fraternity program that was by Smart Chickalina and out of that Gaybar King mare. And so I thought, well, this would be something to look at. So I hung around quite a bit longer and watched him not do very well. He lost a cow, but I helped him because I prayed to the cow gods that he would lose a cow, because I thought he was pretty cool looking. And that was Smart Chickalina's first time for me to see him. So he did lose a cow right at the buzzer. And I went running around back hoping that people's tempers would be not very happy with what had happened. And in front of me was Kobe Woods and Pete Branch. And they were standing in front of me, and they were trying to buy him, and they were talking some real money, and I wasn't in that league at all, but they had recognized what kind of a horse he was. So I just stood back, and I listened, and I watched. And from that, I said, I'm going to go back home, because they said he's not for sale at that time. And I didn't blame him, because he's pretty fancy. But I said, the next big show that's coming up will be the Breeders' Derby, and that's in a couple of months. And so I'll make sure I'm here to watch him show, and maybe the cow gods will get him again. And so what happened is he wound up third in the Breeders' Cup, and that was now I know he can't be bought, but I still run around back, and I wanted to listen to the story because the horse really got me excited, and I kept remembering what his half-sister, three-quarter sister looked like, thinking what he could do for the business. So at that point, they had talked about $250,000 was the offer, but they didn't take it. And it was owned by the Venturesome 4 Partnership. So I come back home and I talk to that veterinarian again, and I tell him, I'm upset this time. I found one that's related to him. I put this effort in it to go down to Fort Worth and watch him show, and there's no way that I could get him bought. Well, this vet called me up about 4 or 5 days later and said, this horse is sitting in a barn over here and he just got hurt. I said, what do you mean he just got hurt? He said he got excited about some mares being moved by his window, and he kicked out and stuck his hock in the front of the bars, his right hock, and so therefore it looks terrible. But he said, I don't think anything's broke. We x-rayed him. Nothing's broke, but superficially he's going to have swelling for quite a while, and he skinned his leg pretty bad, and it doesn't look very good. But the trainer is out of town. He went to the Bahamas to celebrate, but he took his loper with him and forgot his wife. So the people that owned him were called Venturesome 4 Partnership, and they were non-horse people, but they had invested in this stud, and now they've got a horse that's crippled, and they may have a trainer and may not have a trainer when he gets home.
Sure.
So I said, I'm on my way, and I had to drive about 20 miles at that time, and I jumped in the car and in the truck, and I took off, and I got there just about 20 minutes before they did. They were coming up from Dallas, and they had looked like they had just come from the country club. They had slick pants on, and in loafers and golfing shirts, and so there was 4 of them, and their faces were very red because they were coming up to look at something. They didn't know what they were looking at. They just knew that it was their investment, and they should look at it. So the veterinarian had him wrapped up. It looked like one leg was normal, and the other hock was bigger than a football, with gauze around it, and they'd put yellow fluorescent on it. And so, as we know, when that yellow fluorescent hits that wound, it's going to look pretty nasty. It's going to look like an infection too,
Sure.
along with it. So they had them all gauzed up and wrapped, and so they unwrapped them, and the veterinarian explained to him that, here's the deal. He's going to be laid up for a while, but I've x-rayed him, and there's no broken bones, but it's going to take some care. So I'm the only other person in the barn alleyway, and I'm listening to this. So I walked over to him, and I said, guys, what do you guys think? And they're looking at it, they're red-faced, and they don't want to talk to me. I said, well, I'm interested in buying your horse. I said, are you guys have any motion about selling him? And nobody said anything. Everybody just kind of looked at the ground in a circle. So I had prepared 4 checks for $10,000 apiece, and I was going to offer them $40,000 for this horse. And so I pulled those checks out and I handed them to those 4 guys, and I said, that's the best offer I can make you for a 3-legged horse today. And they all looked at each other and stood there for a minute, and finally one guy broke down and said, okay. So he took the check, well, the other 3 guys did too. So I got out and got in my truck, and I had one of those old box phones that you carried
Yes, sir.
around, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do about money, because I don't have any money in the bank.
You're trying to figure out how to cover those 4 checks.
So I got back to Gainesville, and I had now bought a horse, but I didn't have any money, so I put a partnership together in that 20-mile drive, and I had no thoughts of that before I got over there. And I wound up selling 20% to people to Smart Chickalina for $10,000. And the last share that I had to sell to, so I wouldn't bounce a check, was I had to split it in 2. I had to divide it where I give 10% for $5,000, so I could tailor it for somebody to write a check. And I said that I sold them. I bought them for $40,000. We sold them to $50,000 in this little group, and that $10,000 it was going to be mine, that I was going to buy into them, and I would take him to my house, and I'd doctor him, and I'd condition him, and get him back in shape, and I would just give him a bill each month, and that's how I got a chance to get Smart Chickalina.
That's how you got a chance to own and promote and show Smart Chickalina.
2 years later, I still can't get the bay mare out of my mind, because I know I can go do good owning her. So she went from a point of not being for sale to the cattle business went upside down for a while. And that man had to sell the horse, so I went down to Fort Worth, and I bought her in an auction for $60,000. And I kept her a year or two, and I bred her to Freckles Playboy, and I produced a stud colt that was amazing. They wound up breaking a hind ankle as a 2-year-old. We still showed him, and we wound up winning the AQHA World Show with a broken hind leg with a 225 score.
That's the horse. I had the opportunity. You remember I mentioned the other day.
Yep.
I had the opportunity when I first started out as an auctioneer. I got to work at a horse sale in Sherburne, Minnesota. And when I was there in Sherburne, Minnesota, the auction was on Saturday. But on Friday night, you were there and you gave a lecture about the horse industry and about breeding and the stallion business. But I remember I was in my early 20s. And I remember hearing you talk about that horse. What was his name?
Elon's Playboy.
Elon's Playboy. And you told the story of the heart and the talent and the heart and the abilities of Elon's Playboy. And at that time, I wasn't educated enough in the horse business to put this all together. But he was out of the bay mare that was a sister.
Yep, three-quarter sister.
Three-quarter sister to Smart Chickalina.
Yep. And by Freckles Playboy. So when you looked at the pedigree, it was an amazing pedigree. And his leg gave us trouble 3 times. He had 3 operations on it. Texas A&M did 2 of them. And they told me when they were working on him the first time is, Jim, all we can do is we can put this ankle back together, but it won't move. It'll be fixed. And you might get a chance to breed him for a year or 2, 3 years, or would you want us to put him down? And I said, no, I don't want him put down, because I believe in his genetics and I believe how smart he is. And so I said, I want him fixed. So they put some screws into him, and that lasted almost a year, maybe a little longer. And then the screws started calcifying, and so they were cutting into tendons and would keep him a little sore. So then we had to send him back down, and they had to shave that off. Chisel it off is what they did, and come back, and he was sound again for quite a while. And when I say sound, it was locked. His right hind ankle was locked. But in that period of time, Kathy Dawn was riding him for us, and she said he's the smartest horse that she'd ever rode. She had the horse of the year for that year for cutting, and she said the horse that she had to leave behind, which was Elon's Playboy, was the better horse. But she said, we can't keep him sound. I can take him to a cutting and win the first go-round of any cutting, but she said then he's a little too sore to bring back in the second go-around and be the same horse. So she was so impressed with him. But I loved the horse, and we kept him. This happened when he was 2, and we kept him alive till he was 17.
Kept him alive till he was 17.
And raised some awful good horses.
Didn't you go ahead and make an AQHA champion out of him, or show him quite a bit?
We didn't, because he was never sound enough to get through halter classes or anything. But we did win $30,000 in the NCHA, just basically winning first go-rounds.
Yeah, I remember in the lecture when you were talking about that horse,
Yep.
and what you were talking about was the heart and the will, yep. and just the mind of these horses. And I remember you saying that even after all of that he still went on to be an earner, and I knew you had some success with him.
My stories that you're going to hear today are going to be the same story, just different times, different places, because all of it's going to be about heart, and it's going to be about desire, not giving up, because we didn't give up on any of those horses for any reason. That's the way it was when my very first horse on through is I never gave up on him. I give him a chance, and I think I would go to horse shows and I'd see people with nice trucks and nice trailers and fancy saddles, and then I'd look at what I got there with, and it wasn't that way. But it became that way. At one time, I was fortunate enough and blessed enough by the Lord that I wound up having some of the shiniest trucks and trailers, and He gave me some of the best horses. But those horses really built me a program.
Absolutely. I remember a long time before. First of all, I had the privilege of meeting you when I was pretty young. I was running around, chasing Bill Richardson around. I was running around with Bill and getting to meet horsemen and be out here at Gainesville and go to a lot of nice places and get to see stuff like that for the first time. And I was so impressed. But I remember before I ever got to come out here seeing that Babcock brand and hearing of Smart Chickalina. And you had a lot of great stallions. It wasn't only Smart Chickalina. There's the list is long. Mr. Dual-Pep, Reminick, so many famous horses that I'd heard of. And then when I got the chance to come out here and see the horses and see the lifestyle, at that time, I was that same kid you were from Canada, except I was from Mississippi.
Yep.
And I'd never seen the fancy trucks. I'd never seen the really nice horses, and it left a lifelong impression on me. And I guess we've been friends now for
Long time.
over 25 years now.
Yep, long time.
Getting to see what you've done in the horse business has just been unbelievable. Everybody that watches this video today, I guarantee you every one of you will be familiar with Jim Babcock and Babcock Ranch and Smart Chickalina and Reminick, Mr. Dual-Pep, and all the Launch Playboy, all the great stallions that have came from the Babcock Ranch program. I guess it would have been back in 2008, 2009, whenever all the banks shut down, the housing market crashed, the whole economy crashed, the horse business. You kind of downsized and have been under the radar pretty much for the last 15 years. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you what, I downsized, but it wasn't by choice.
Yes, sir.
I had an operation that was going wide open. I had 2 ranches, one in Gainesville and one in Valley View. I had a total of 400 stalls, 31 employees during most of that period of time that helped build a program that we had trailers full of cutters and reiners and cow horses, often going different directions, and then trying to stay up to date with what's going on, and standing about 10 studs. And we bred in the neighborhood of 700 mares during that period of time. I had an operation that was going out of control. It was going wide open, and I was working with some of the best trainers in the industry. The Lord blessed me to have those contacts, and most of them I grew up with and knew them from the beginning. So when we sat around and talked about doing deals, it was pretty simple because we were friends. And the Lord's blessed me with a tremendous amount of great horses. My father, when I went to Canada once, my mother was passing away with cancer, and I took a quarter horse news program up to Canada in the back of my truck, and my dad happened to pick it up and was reading through it. And the next day he said, "Jim," he said, "there's a deal in here that said there's a list of 500 studs that are performance sires." And he said, "Some of those names sure seem familiar. Will you mark a line through them? So let me see which ones I remembered," because he was in his 80s at that point. So I sat down and run a stroke through 39 of the 500 that I had trained or sold or shown or been involved with, but 39 of the top 500 stallions
Came from Babcock.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. And even though Dad wasn't a horse lover, he loved Jim.
Yeah,
he was a supporter of you.
He did.
He was very proud of what you accomplished.
They never missed a special award or a special thing going on in the horse business that they didn't drive down from Canada, which was 23 hours, that they didn't attend. So every year that stud sired another $1 million worth of horses or got an award or any of the other studs that I had, they were there. They supported it all the way through.
That's a wonderful thing. What a blessing.
So it was pretty cool.
You were breeding all those horses, had 400 stalls, and 30 years plus at that point, or maybe 40 years at that point, I don't remember, but a long history showing horses, breeding horses, and had both ranches going here. And that would have been in 2009 when you dispersed the first time. What I want people to know is what you've been doing. You've been a little bit under the radar, Jim. You haven't.
Yes, sir.
You haven't been on. I haven't seen you on social media. I haven't seen you doing any marketing, any advertising. There's a lot of people out there that were Babcock Ranch fans, for years that maybe aren't aware of what's been going on the last 16 years. Where you've been, what you've been doing.
Well, it's you kind of hinted that you might hit me with that question earlier, give me a heads up, and you had lots of class about it to see whether you should bring that up or not. And my attitude has been, since this has happened, that it was life. In the way the Lord blesses you, you go through a storm, but there's always something better after you survive the storm.
Yes, sir.
And that's what's happened to me, because at that time I had some people trying to buy the ranches, the horses, and some other real estate I had for $53 million. And that would have happened in December in 2007. And so we're working on the deal, which is complicated because we had a lot going on. It wasn't going to be a 10-minute deal. It was going to take a few months to put together. And then in February, the world went upside down, and all of a sudden they lost their financing, and that meant that I lost my deal.
Yes, sir.
And all of a sudden I get a call from a bank up in Colorado that had been taken over by the FDIC, and they give me a 60-day window to get them $20 million. Through the team of people that I had, that I was making too much money in the horse business. I haven't heard that in years, but I was making too much money at that point, and they said, you've got to get diversified, which made sense. So that's why I started buying some pretty choice real estate, and I got involved with a facility in Fort Collins, just down the road from the school, that I was going to have about 400 houses built around a monster indoor arena that would be the biggest one north of Denver to the Canadian border. And we're going to have major shows and events, but those houses that were built around it, we would actually deed them a stall. They could buy 1 stall or 2 stalls or 5 stalls, whatever they wanted to do. That meant that the manure would all stay down at the barn, wouldn't be in their backyard. At that point, it was about 70% of the people that would buy houses there were retired women that had had success in business and stuff, and yet wanted to be with their horse. So I did get it diversified, still in horses, and it wound up being that I had to declare bankruptcy, because when I lost my customers and everybody else was crumbling in on me, I'd sold a horse for $1 million, and I thought that was great. And it was, they couldn't pay. They couldn't pay the balance. They paid me a good deposit, and they couldn't pay the balance of it, but that was enough to kind of cripple you at that time.
Sure.
So I started all over again with zero. And when I left there, I didn't have anything. And so that's why I was quiet, and for a period of time, and it was tough. And I had lots of people ask me, how are you doing it? How come you're not drinking? How come you're not on drugs? How come you still are working at doing the same kind of stuff? Well, it's the only thing I know. That's the gift the Lord gave me, was horses. And in that period of time, I lost a son, and that's the most painful thing in the world. Nothing can be as great as that. And I lost a son that I was super proud of, and only had 2 boys. Lost him, so that was about 1.5 years. All I wanted to do was clean stalls and feed horses.
Yes, sir.
I didn't care about answering phone calls. I didn't care about having anybody come by and look. I just believed that they're not my horses. These were the Lord's horses, and I'm just a caretaker. I'm supposed to take care of them. And so that's how I get through all this stuff, is I've kept going and going and going. And I've made a hell of a comeback. When you look at these horses, you're going to see that He's blessed me on every one of them. I can't sit there and tell you today. We took pictures of about a dozen horses this morning before we came over here, and I can't tell you which is my favorite. You know, and I live with them every day.
whenever you sold out, you ended up with one colt by Smart Chickalina. And you named that horse Heaven Sent Chick.
Yep.
And he was a godsend at the time.
Yep.
And that is where you restarted and how you built the program to where you are today.
Yep. I'm a strong believer in the Lord because he gets me through these messes. And Heaven Sent Chick was a plan that I'd had for 15 years. Cowboy Smarts wound up being was a son of Smart Chickalina. He wound up being the highest point-earning reining horse of all time in AQHA. He's got 470 AQHA reining points that I put most of them on there. He was going to be a replacement for Smart Chickalina. So Chick's Achy Breaky at one time had the most amateur cutting points on a horse of all time, but he was the son of Smart Chickalina. So every couple of years I would keep what I considered the best son of Smart Chickalina to be a replacement, because what it appeared to me, if I had a good set of mares that really fit Smart Chickalina, they would fit a really good son of his.
Sure.
And so what had happened though is if I had to disconnect the engine off of the train, I'd have to go out of business, because I've seen that a lot of times where people have to just get forced into, they lose their stud, they're forced into going and getting a different stallion. He doesn't match up with their mares, so their breeding program didn't work, and then they got to go buy a bunch of new mares that fit their hopes and dreams.
Sure.
So what I wanted to do was have a continuous train that I could just interchange the engines and still keep going down the highway, and that's been my breeding program. So I've condensed it to having them, everything I've got is going to be bred the same you see when you look through there.
Yes, sir.
They're going to be Reminick, they're going to be Smart Chickalina, and they're going to be a Little Peppy, and just out of a couple family trees in the Little Peppy that I really liked. So I've kind of kept that, and it's like having a chemistry set in your back laboratory where you just go out there and put a little of this and a little of that, a little of this, and you wind up getting all three bloodlines of horses commingled in these horses that produce me the kind of horses that I love. And I'm a little teary-eyed.
Yes, sir.
Because we're talking about 50 years in Raymond.
50 years. Well, with all the history and the success you've had, you're obviously a horseman, and I've always been a fan, admirer of horsemen. I respect real horsemen. It in itself is a God-given talent that very few people have, and you are definitely an accomplished horseman. But you told me that in all your years in the horse business, you feel like that today you have the best set of horses that you ever raised.
Yep.
And you've been there quietly for the last 16 or 17 years, however long it's been, just trying to really do what you love and be a horseman. And a lot of people, a lot of young people, you know, they've all heard of Smart Chickalina and some of the horses that you've named. But some of them have, you know, maybe haven't been as familiar the last 15 years with Babcock Ranch as it was when I was coming up. It was the number one brand. But for you to be able to sit there and say that you today, with all the success and all the famous horses that you've raised and trained and shown, for you to be able to sit there today and say that you have the very best set of horses today, that you feel like as a horseman that your greatest accomplishment is the set of horses that you have right now. That's a lifelong dream, and that's a heck of a statement. And we could not be any more honored to have the opportunity to sell them in Corsica, South Dakota.
This is one of those opportunities that I want to share with people. And being a horse person is a lot like being a car dealer. You can get a pretty bad rap for being able to tell stories that you don't have to back up. I'm going to guarantee you won't buy a nicer horse than this set of horses. I don't do any tails ever, because I bred that into them, and that's all in their mind and their conformation. If they're healthy and strong, I try to breed a happy, healthy horse that fits every amateur that's out there, and it becomes a family horse. And my sales, how I've survived the last 15 years plus, is on repeat sales, where people call up and said, I've been riding old Bucky 10 or 12 years and he's about give out. Get me another one, just like him. And because you ask him, what size and what color. I want the same horse, and that's kind of what happens is I get calls from all kinds of people and say, just get me one more like this, and then I can quit in the horse business, and is what they'll often tell me. But I do not do any advertising. COVID come along, and I was over 70, and they said that if you're 70, you're high risk, and that you don't need to be meeting a lot of other people, and if you got a breeding facility, people are going to come. So I just quit advertising and said we're going to reroute it, breed a few of the choice mares that I've got that I really am in love with, and I'm going to produce some nice babies, and I can select the people that are coming in here. And I've managed to survive for 15 years without advertising, and I believed in advertising and promotion. I advertised every place. At one time, I was in the top 5 buyers and top 5 sellers for 5 years in the NCHA. So that's out of thousands and thousands of people. But I kept wheeling, dealing, and trading around to get the blood that I wanted and the kind of horses I wanted. And I really believe I'm there. I haven't sent Chick. I walked out into a pasture of about 40 yearling studs at that time that I owned. And it was like a spotlight was shining down on him. He had a slick haircut. He looked like his hair was on fire, and he was big and pretty. And I just tried to build one, but it wasn't the right time to take a replacement for Smart Chickalina because he lasted till he was 28. I had him 24 years. And it was all the planning I had wasn't the Lord's planning, and it wasn't in his time. So you have to wait for his time. And when that colt come along was the same year that Smart Chickalina went sterile. And all of a sudden I got the replacement engine right there. And that's the way I felt about it. So then that's a pretty good story right in itself.
It is.
But as time went on, I would go through the bankruptcy. I had a partner on Heaven Sent Chick that had been with me for 40 years. And he called me up and said, Jim, the bankruptcy, I've bought the other half of that horse. And I was kind of sad and disappointed, but happy all at the same time.
Happy all at the same time.
It was a hell of a mixture of feelings because I didn't want to share that horse with anybody. You know, they'd taken my half away in the bankruptcy, so it was gone, and then I kind of was begrudging him for being in that situation to take my horse. That's the way I felt.
Sure.
And then I said, okay, because I know nobody else is going to train his horses but me. I said, what are you going to do with him? Because he was 3 years old, and they weren't taking very good care of him out there at the end. And so he said, I don't care. And he said, I don't care if you cut on him. I don't care if you rope on him. I don't care if you rein on him. I don't care. He said, I'm going to give him to you. He's your horse. So he gave me the best horse of my lifetime. He gave to me. And I can never thank him enough because I've circled the United States and a few other countries looking for a better horse all the time. And I have given as much as $1 million for horses, which is a pretty scary thing when you're that country boy that $250 and mom and dad had to go to the bank. So to wind up writing a check for over $1 million is a pretty big deal. And the best horse I've had in my lifetime is Heaven Sent Chick because he's the most complete of any of them, and I got him given to me. Now you think the Lord's not at work.
That's amazing.
And that's what this program is, and that's why I picked out, there's probably a dozen exceptional Heaven Sent Chick mares in the broodmare pan. And until all this stuff in my life changed the last year and a half, I thought I'd be set for life if I just could work those a dozen mares, that they'd make me enough good ones I didn't have to have anymore.
Sure.
And I'm an addict for a good horse. I love them.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. You've lived your whole life for it.
Yep.
I just want everyone at home or everyone that's watching this podcast or thinking about coming to Corsica. First of all, there's 43 head that Jim has, and we're going to sell all 43 head of those horses September 12th. The preview will be on Friday, September 11th, and then the horse sale will be on Saturday, September 12th. And we're going to sell 43 head right there in Corsica, South Dakota, absolute to the highest bidder. And I just hope that by watching this video that you guys understand what an opportunity this is to buy in on a piece of history, to buy a horse from a horseman that's had the level of success as Jim Babcock and Babcock Ranch, from the bloodlines that he spent a lifetime putting together. I went over there, looked at them myself, and I don't know that I've ever seen a better set of horses in one group. They are cookie cutter consistent. They are gorgeous. They are talented. They are good-minded. All those studs you had standing there in one barn, never heard the first horse squeal. As we led those mares and different ones up and down the alley in front of them to go picture the horses, I never heard the first horse open his mouth. I never heard the first cribber in the barn. It was just unbelievable being in an atmosphere like that with such healthy, happy, quality horses.
That's been my dream, that I could make a happy, healthy horse, and that's what I've included in any time I've had the opportunity to tell people. I want people to be happy with them. I want them to not do the old horse trading deal where you say, I buried that one into somebody and it's their problem now. I want people to be able to call up if they buy one and pick my brain. I'd be glad to give you any information on how to take care of them, or how to breed them, or how to train them. I've had a lot of experience with them, and in all those different categories. So I want to help people. I want to help them have success. At the end of the day, I want them to be my number they call first if they think they got a problem.
You can see these horses. You can look them up at Corsica Horse Sale LLC on Facebook, or you can go to CorsicaHorseSale.com. But we're going to also create a Facebook page just for Babcock Ranch Dispersal Sale, and we'll have all of this up within the next 10 days. But when we do all of that, we will publish your phone number. We'll have your phone number, Jim. All of you people watching, if you're interested in buying some of these quality horses, call Mr. Babcock, talk to him, and he'll tell you about each and every one of them. He's had his hands on them personally every day of their lives. He can tell you about all the horses. What an opportunity that is to buy horses from someone who knows that much about them.
It's like a chain. The links all fit together all the way through. Everything's kind of related to everything, and there was a reason behind it. I never hesitated culling a horse. If I didn't like it, it didn't stay around very long.
Absolutely.
And the good ones stayed around a long time. And that's the results of these babies and stuff you're seeing now. These are the ones the mothers have been there 25 years. And to keep them there 20 years is, you gotta like her.
Smart Chickalina, you won the world on Smart Chickalina in the cutting and the reining. And to my knowledge, he's the only horse in history to ever make both accomplishments, to achieve both. World champion in the cutting and the reining.
Yes.
And that's what I see with these horses. They are so versatile. There's so many different ways you can go with them.
That's exactly right. Smart Chickalina was a world's champion cutter, and I did it the hard way. We showed him an American quarter horse cutting and won the honor roll and world's champion, but we showed him an American cutting horse and was reserve champion, and we showed him in the NCHA, was in the top 15. And so on a given weekend, we go to 3 different associations cuttings, and that was at the same time Dual Pep was running down the road and tearing it up the highway. But we were running with him on the weekends that we'd show against him. It's just that we didn't accumulate the same amount of money because we went to quarter horse where they didn't really pay you, and the American cutting horse was just getting started. So after I did that, and I made a choice that I wanted to promote him in the reining horse world, because I'd ridden a lot of reiners in my lifetime, and so I got the opportunity to warm him up most times before all the cuttings, and I'd piddle with him, play with him, and said, this horse is ready to go to a reining. So we took him over to Craig Johnson, and Craig Johnson was living in Gainesville, and so I'd take him over there, and he said the hardest thing he had to do to learn how to ride that horse was, if you run real fast going one direction and you said, whoa, you better turn your head real fast or you're going to be on the dirt, because the way he'd roll back. He said, I never rode anything like that, and he had won some futurity championships in the NRHA and things like that, but he was the first one to have that kind of power in a rollback, and he established a different look. He became, and people told me that I was crazy, which I've been told before, but they told me I was crazy for taking a world champion cutter and ruining him by making him a reining horse. And so, as it is, he is the only horse out of 6 million quarter horses that's been a world champion in 2 categories like that, in cutting and reining. And he's got a half a dozen sons that are the closest to breaking his deal. They've all won a world title and a reserve world title in those 2 events, and which just carried on that genetics to say these horses are plain different than everybody else's because they've tested them, and there they are. There's no other stud that's done that.
No, sir.
And even when you go to the reining fraternity and you see the big banners up on the wall, where the studs that get put up there have sired $1 million worth of winners. Smart Chickalina's got more studs up there, sons of his, than any of the other studs. And that's proof, again, to say it's not only him, but it's whatever he produces carries it on down through. So I get calls all the time from just people all over the world. And I went to Japan, and I judged a horse show there, and half of the horses at that horse show had my brand on it. So that must have been somehow related to Smart Chickalina, or they wouldn't have been there. And I don't know about the other younger horses that were probably born there and trained and showed in Japan, but I've been all through Europe. I've had quarter horse judges and stuff tell me that they've never been any place in the world that didn't judge a horse with my brand on it. Any place. And that's kind of one of those things that makes you feel pretty good that your horses are out there and they're showing and people are happy with them.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Jim, it is definitely a privilege and an honor for me to be able to sit across the table from you and to even hear the stories of all the great horses and the success you've had. And I know that myself and so many others out there are a fan. They're a fan of your horses, they're a fan of your program, and are thankful for this opportunity. We're going to sell these horses in Corsica, South Dakota, Corsica Horse Sale, on September 11th and 12th. And you can sure look them up. We're going public. We're going to have a Facebook page, Babcock Ranch Dispersal, on Facebook. Also, you can look at our Facebook page at Corsica Horse Sale LLC, and make sure whatever you do that you join us for the Babcock Ranch Dispersal Sale, September 11th and 12th at Corsica, South Dakota.
Well, I tell you what, Blake, that's an opportunity that you've provided between you and Todd that's been amazing. And the Lord put me in this spot for a reason, and He gave me all these great horses. So it's really something very special to me to get a chance to get them marketed where I think that they're going to get good homes and do somebody some good because they're special horses.
There's so many of your friends and customers and people that you did business with, people that bred the Smart Chickalina and all your many other stallions that live in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, and all over that region right there. And that's why I love Corsica, South Dakota so much, because in the equine world, in the horse world, Corsica, South Dakota is Central Horse America. And there's so many of those people that are going to have the privilege and the opportunity to come down, first of all, and get to see you again and visit with you and see the horses and see what you've done. And like I said, we couldn't be any more thankful. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.